Welcome to the next, part 2 of the Victor Marx Show with my dear friend Phil Darke. Yesterday, man, it got so good that if you didn't hear it, you need to go back and listen to it on my podcast. On our website, Phil is married. He's got 5 children, just like us. But I knew him when he was a young man, before he was even married. He's a well-educated and actually teaching professor at university, even clerk for a federal judge in Honolulu. But what I want to talk about today, and what I'm excited, is to talk about your book and your podcast, In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. And just, by the way, that book, man, it really helps us understand how we can love with excellence millions of orphaned and vulnerable children in our world who've lost their parents and they don't have a relative to love them and likely won't even be adopted. So we're going to get into this, but thank you, Phil, for hanging around and doing another broadcast with us today. Welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely love doing this.
So let's get right into it. But my question to you, because yesterday we talked about fatherlessness, we talked about the family unit, we talked about those 3 dads who all, they adopted a baby and all their names in them on the birth certificate, not somewhere else in the world, but right here in the U.S. And we talked about the core values of family and why it's so important. But why did you, as a lawyer, a dad, why did you step out of that world, which certainly had its benefits? Why did you step out of that and go into caring about, the orphan care?
Well, that's a much longer story than we have time for today. I mean, you know the full deal, but the short of it is God made it clear in my life that I was supposed to be doing something more with my legal mind than just fighting over money every day. And, not that there's anything wrong with that for the lawyers out there. It's a great profession. It's just not what I was supposed to be doing. It's not what I was called to do. Could make a ton of money doing it, could probably share, money with other people, but God made it clear in different ways to me over the course of about 4 or 5 years. Interestingly, I'd come into it through the door of International Justice Mission and the anti-trafficking side of things, which I think goes into the podcast that I do that really talks about the interconnectedness of all the different areas of ministry that touches the lives of vulnerable and children and families. But really with the idea of I got connected with the orphan care space through my wife and I talking about potential of adoption. And so that got me connected with an orphanage in Honduras, which is the orphanage that we actually call it an orphan care community because it's family-based care. It's really the model that we talk about that inspired In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. And it was really something that I came into it never expecting to be leaving the law firm. It was more thinking I'm going to do some pro bono work and just help out people on how they can get connected with best practice orphan care. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but that's really, looking back, that's what I was looking to do. So
okay,
I ended
up,
yeah.
Well, wait, all this best practice. I remember one time you said you were at a fundraiser and it was, for ministry organization or whatever, and you got on the subject of talking about when someone was they were proud of sending their clothes to an orphanage and used clothes like we all typically do. And I remember your statement, you just kind of challenged them like, well, what would be wrong with brand new nice clothes? And I thought, man, if that's not true, we feel our religious charity is great when we give kids like orphans or those who are poor and needy our leftovers, and we pat ourselves on the back about it. And that's one of the things that I so appreciated about you, Phil, is you said, like, no, there's got to be a better level of excellence in orphan care. And let me ask, for people who really want to dig into this, what's the easiest way for them to get your book or listen to your podcast before I forget?
Yeah, for sure. It's Amazon.com really is the place to get In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. We are out. I'm out of them, or else I would say, hey, just connect with me and I can get you a copy. But Amazon.com is where to get the book. Podcast you can find really wherever you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. ThinkOrphan.com is the place you can go to get all the show notes and everything else if you want to go really deep into there. You can also reach me at Darke, PDARKE, at ProvidenceWorld.com. And I would love to connect with you if you have any questions about anything that we're talking about here and about the book, about the podcast. Really, just to connect with me. If you want to know how you can love orphan and vulnerable children, how you can help children and families to flourish, definitely connect with me at any of those places.
Yeah, something that's so important and so critical in our nation and world. It's just not a quick little fix. It's not a microwave solution. It actually takes intentionality, planning, being strategic, and having the heart to want to do this. But it's there the right way, because so much of people's time, energy, and even giving, they think they're doing right, but it's oftentimes not helping the problem. And worse, it could be perpetuating it to be worse. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a great book one of the books that inspired me in a lot of ways, and it's one of the books that I really wanted In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence to be a follow-up on in the orphan care space, is a book called When Helping Hurts. And it talks about how we can alleviate poverty without hurting others or ourselves. Brian Fickert, Stephen Corbett, they're both economists at Chalmers Center at Covenant College down in Tennessee. Brian Fickert actually wrote the foreword to In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. A brilliant man, a good friend of mine, and he's a guy who really studied it to say, look, we all are in poverty. We all have either poverty of being or poverty of relationship or poverty of community or poverty of a relationship with God. And these are things that if we go into it with that, then we have a mutual brokenness that we're seeking to fill. When we go into it with a superiority complex, with we are better than you, that we have something to offer you, but you have nothing to offer us, it tends to exacerbate those poverties that we talked about there. Take the poverty of being, for example. The poverty of being is either a God complex that we often have as Americans going into these places, and you've seen that going overseas, going to different parts of the world. Unfortunately, a lot of times, these people in these countries around the world exacerbate that because they actually have an inferiority complex. And so when we come in, they say, yes, give us stuff, give us stuff, give us stuff. And we do, and we feel great about it, and actually increases that divide rather than us coming together and going, you have something to teach us, we have something to teach you, as you would in any other relationship you have here in the United States or wherever you are. And if you go into that mutual brokenness that we can help each other to be whole because we are brothers and sisters in Christ, or we are helping people who don't know the Lord, right? We have something we can learn from each other, and we have ways that we can help that mutual brokenness. So if we see it as reconciling relationships, rather than us fixing you or us helping you, then it changes everything. And it's something that, going back to that giving of materials, the way that you look at that and you go, hey, if you give your leftovers, if you give things that are shoes that have holes in them, or your used underwear, or a shirt that is just whatever, it's worn, well, think about that at the other end. That actually creates a lot more work with these people on the ground because they actually have to sift through everything to see what they can even do. Just that alone tells you that you're creating more work than you're helping. And that's a good tangible example. But there's also a lot of that mutual brokenness. I strongly recommend When Helping Hurts. If you haven't read it, go grab it because it will help you see things a little bit differently. I don't have time to go into it again. I spent about 4 classes on that. But those are things that are what we're at the core of In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence really was to frame a conversation in the orphan care space to say, how can we really care for these children and give them the different things that every child needs? That's why the subtitle is My Kids, Your Kids, Our Kids. Right, nice. To see these children around the world. And you and I have talked about James 1:27 that says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God our Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world.
Now, let's talk about a very current situation right now that deals exactly with that. Our border, our southern border. Now with the new president and the White House, there's been absolutely an increase, right? And we're hopefully planning to go down there and see the humanitarian situation with the kids who are being housed. But what are your thoughts on this? Because obviously, we're Christians, we're a good country. We want to help anybody. We don't want to turn children away. But by helping, it can create more pain because there are a lot of people that don't see the reality of what happens with young people, children and women who get on these trails to get up here. Many never make it, and you will never know. You will never know. Many and most are raped, and you will never know. I've been to Juarez. We've been on the border. We have friends in the Department of Homeland Security and Border Control. It's worse than people think. But I really wanted to know your thoughts about it because we obviously don't turn cold to this issue. But how can we better it?
Well, Victor, I mean, the reality there is everything has its shadow, right? Everything has two sides to it. So with the media, you're going to get one side that's their side. With the government, you're going to get one side that's their side, depending on who's in the Oval Office, right? You're going to get different things that are there. And what I look to it is go, okay, what is the truth? The truth of it is, like you said, there's so much we're not seeing and so much we're not hearing. And the interesting thing there, Victor, is I think you know this, on my podcast, I actually had an entire series on the refugee crisis. Mm-hmm. I interviewed world vision leaders. I interviewed world relief leaders. I interviewed people that are other leaders, global leaders on the refugee crisis that have visited different countries around the world. Some of these men some of them are people that we don't know, that you wouldn't know by name. But they, would all say there are two sides of the story. The World Relief President said, look, we need to have a balance of security and mercy, right? And to be able to know that we can't just let everybody else into our country. Mm-hmm. That's not wise. Of course that's not wise. You and I both know that a good chunk of those kids coming across the border that are now, quote unquote, separated from their parents weren't with their parents.
Right.
They were likely being trafficked. And so if you don't have a system to understand who these kids are, if they are being trafficked, because the last thing you want to do is bring kids in who are trafficked and to be able to have them be exploited and just abused over and over and over again. What it's interesting to me is you see the same people who are fighting against trafficking are fighting for immigration just willy-nilly. And I go, do you really know the story? Do you really know the full story? And the answer is no, because we can't possibly know the full story. You and I can't possibly know. You know a lot more of the story because you've been there and you're talking with people a lot who have a lot more knowledge than I do. But I just know from talking with other people and from what I do around the world to go, look, I know that international adoption has stories where there's people that are trafficking these kids to people in the U.S., unbeknownst to the people who are adopting children from Ethiopia on some instances. People from Ethiopia are being told, hey, if you sell your kid to us for $1,000, we're going to get them an education in the United States, and they're going to come back here to Ethiopia and help you and your family. And then this family in the United States, unbeknownst to them, is adopting a child being told that their parents died. And then 3 years later, their kid talks about how their mom did X, Y, Z, and they're like, wait a sec, what's going on here?
Did everybody just hear that? I mean, pause for a second if you got distracted. Listen to this. This is some of the stuff that's happening in the world of trafficking. Kids being sold, parents thinking they're making a huge sacrifice. People in America not knowing. It falls into that same category, which we do, of counter sex trafficking, which is different from, just making people aware, but we're actually identifying and, inserting risk to stop it. But some people, misinformed, but well-meaning, will support organizations that talk about rescuing a child, heavy on the rescue, but nothing to do with the system, the mechanism, where all they're doing is creating bed space. Mm-hmm. And yes, does it help that child for the moment? Absolutely. but how more important it is to not lose opportunity to stop the mechanism, to bring justice into the whole deal, not create more opportunity because, this is the world we live in. So I am so glad that you're here as a subject matter expert giving insight to our friends. If you just tuned in, this is a good friend, colleague, Phil Darke. He is, I've known him since before he was married.
That's right.
And he married up. Trust you me. She's not only beautiful, but she's capable, just like my bride. And y'all have done so much over the years and dedicated your service to furthering God's kingdom through really practical means and again, reaching widows and orphans in their time of need. Now, you both have very stellar backgrounds in athletics at the college level, and you are using that nowadays, including and with expanding your reach of effort using soccer to help people understand leadership and just coaching. Tell me about those podcasts so people listening can tune in and benefit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to keep it simple, it's howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. That's where you can go to find out what those podcasts are. But really, at the end of the day, I want people to understand leadership. I want to understand how people can flourish. And so I want to use soccer, this game that I love, and it's also the world's most spoken language. So when I'm looking around the world, when I've gone in and taught leadership in different continents around the world, I use soccer analogies all the time because I know that can immediately connect with people. You and I both know if you go to a different part of the world, you throw a ball in the field, you can have people from all different races, backgrounds, colors, creeds, religions, doesn't matter. You go out there and play and you can connect. And so you can be able to come in, and those are some leadership lessons that we talk about where we take the lessons from the game and we say, okay, how does this apply to your life? How does this apply to your leadership? How does this apply to your marriage? How does this apply to your parenting? Because at the end of the day, I want to use this game for good. It has a ton of good in and of itself, just to have fun and get out there and get exercise and do all those things. But if that's where it ends, we're missing a whole lot. So what I hope from this is not only are people learning how soccer explains leadership, but it causes them to think about how, bowling explains leadership, how your drama theater explains leadership, how these other things leadership, where you're thinking about how these different things that we're doing explain how we can use all these things that we're doing for the greater good, for the flourishing of this. Because I think there's so many lessons from the game that we can learn. And yes, soccer has some unique lessons that aren't from everything else. But that's really the idea behind it. It's why I ended up doing it. And interestingly already, Victor, just yesterday, I was on a call with a dude from Nigeria and a dude from Tel Aviv, Israel, talking about, hey guys, how can we incorporate these principles from In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence into the work that you're doing in the slums of Nigeria with these children who need love? How can we make sure that the work you're doing isn't just playing soccer, but it's actually pouring into them with these prongs of this framework that we've built in this book on family education and nutrition and community integration, spiritual formation, all these things that are critical to their development? That you have a platform because of this game, because of this sport that you can use. So I'm hoping to get, if you're a soccer player out there and you have a platform, a professional platform, or if you're a college player, if you're a coach and you are impacting lives, look, I'm telling you right now, if you're a professional player, you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
Because you have a platform that you can use for way more than putting the ball in the back of a net.
Yep.
So that's why I do what I do on that regard. Coaching Character is another podcast we do that really is bringing all those principles that we're talking about to the game, to say, coaches, how can you use these principles? How can you incorporate them into your practices, into your trainings, to make sure that the kids that you're coaching, there is no coach out there who has a neutral impact on his or her players. They have positive or they have negative. So I want to help you to understand how you can positively impact every child that comes into it, because you have not just a responsibility but a privilege with these kids that are coming in, and sometimes adults that are coming into your care as a coach. Anyway.
Now, this is outstanding. I think our listeners do understand, in fact, that there's a crisis of leadership in America, and in whatever sphere we're on, whatever lane they're in. And I'll talk to people of faith. I think so many people of faith have taken a back seat, a passive, position, and allowed other people to get into key positions. Let's just talk about school boards. Let's talk about education. We have, gosh, I think since the beginning of the year, in 2 months, we've had, I don't know, 60 million people, be impacted by our social media stuff. I've gotten a lot of feedback from actually people who don't hold the same values, don't hold the same care for moral issues or ethics, that are in very significant positions leading and teaching kids. And they will impact them.
Absolutely.
Good or bad. So, it starts in the home, but we need leaders in the church. And, okay, I'll just throw this out here. I've told pastors, and I love my pastor friends. I love the dedication of people in ministry. It's hard, it's tough, but there are a bunch of knuckleheads out there that need to adjust or get out the wave who are in ministry. And I tell them, look, just because you have a gift to teach the Bible, it doesn't make you a men's leader. Access people who are experienced and gifted to teach and lead men. And then you just teach the Bible. But don't think you have to do it all, and unless you're really strong in that. But we've got to raise up men who can lead well and then impact everyone. Because, here in America, this is true. For a long time, the pinnacle of spirituality was you would end up in ministry. And you've been president of an organization and a ministry. I have too. I've been on church. I was a pastor, both a senior pastor and an associate. I think I bit at both of them, but I learned. But what would you say to that, where people who aspire just to be in ministry versus be a leader wherever they are in life?
Well, we have created this secular sacred divide, which is just false, right? We all have a way
Say that again? That's a pretty college. That sounded pretty high mighty.
Yeah, I apologize. I apologize for that.
Again.
I forgot who I was talking to for a minute, which really, the fact
Bring
that you
it
were a
down
pastor,
for the Cajun men.
the fact that you were a pastor and associate pastor shows how low the bar is, folks. Just a heads up on that.
Exactly.
That's something right there. No, but in all seriousness,
they were desperate.
The secular sacred divide. So we basically put the pastor, quote unquote pastor, the leader of ministry. I mean, heck, when I became a president of a Christian ministry, everyone said, "Ooh, that is more spiritual than you being a lawyer." But let me tell you right now, if you're a lawyer out there doing amazing work for the kingdom, that's an incredible spiritual leader.
Get it.
That's something that is going to be way harder to do than what I'm doing right now from a spiritual standpoint. Now, I'm not going to tell you the spiritual warfare is massive in the work that I do. No question about it. I mean, kids, my wife, me, we're being attacked all over the place. If we're not in prayer, absolutely. Pastors as well. But that's part of what I get confused about, Victor, and you'll agree with me here, and I may be going a little off topic here, but
come on. If
pastors aren't experiencing spiritual warfare and spiritual battle, what are they doing?
They're not being effective, I can tell you now. And it ebbs and flows, but man, it's like a combat vet. If you're put into these positions where you got to do the work, you're going to get shot at, brother.
Well, and I think what happens, too, is what you see a lot of times in our churches today, and I'm not going to say it's just mega church, it's also small churches. It happens all the time, where the void of leadership in our society, where we have created this. I mean, if you just look at John Maxwell has 5 levels of leadership. Positional leadership is at the bottom. That's not true leadership. That's just a position. But you're seeing that a lot of pastors are seeing it as, well, I'm pastor, therefore I'm leader. No, you're not. Whether you're a pastor, I want pastors to have to earn the title of pastor, where you're actually shepherding, right? A pastor is supposed to be shepherding the flock, but what we've turned a pastor into is a preacher. where you
Yeah.
are preaching on Sundays, you're spending 40 hours a week preparing that sermon, and you preach, and then you leave the church right afterwards rather than actually spending time to pastor your flock. You're not even doing it on Sundays, let alone throughout the week. So
That's
again,
good.
this is something that I think that going back to that
Ouch.
secular sacred divide, and I'm not condemning or saying any particular pastor. I'm just saying hopefully this is a challenge to you pastors.
Right.
And going back to where we say, like, I'm here to just say that I'm just the messenger. And I'm
Yeah.
just someone saying how I read the Bible, how I read Scripture, how I saw these leaders in the church. Now, there are people like the Apostle Paul who is there to just throw it out there, drop the mic, and go to a different city, yes, but he also clearly shepherded, as his letters tell us, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those are things, anyway, that's my 2 cents on that, where I want to make sure you understand, folks, just because you have a position, you're not a leader. I think that's where our void of leadership comes from, is we've said, look, all these leaders, quote unquote, in the government, language matters, words matter. To call someone a leader is a very, very important title that you want to give someone who's actually influencing in a way that is not because they have a position, but because of who they are and because you want to follow them. So if that's not your pastor, I want to say challenge your pastor to be better. Don't bail and go to a different church. Go and encourage your pastor, love your pastor, and challenge them. Iron sharpens iron. That is not something that's an easy process. That's something that's hurt, that's hard, that causes sparks. So that's something I want to encourage you to do. And I do it, my pastors are my brothers, and I see them as that, and I love them, and I encourage them, and I challenge them, and they do the same to me. And if you're not doing that, I want to say, go for it. Start doing
Yeah.
that.
That's one of the reasons why you were on my board for a decade. I knew I always had you to go, and what about that? And what about this? Are you sure? And that actually gave me a sense of security, because I go, people get in trouble when they start surrounding themselves with yes men.
Yep.
Now, if someone's just a bonehead and they're not for you, well, that's different. But when somebody loves you and loves God and speak the truth to you, and heck, I end up mentoring you in the early years, right? And that's why I knew you would be a solid fit as a board member for so many years. Now, we're going to have to wrap this up, which I'm okay with doing it because I've talked to you enough. I've had my fill today, Phil. Did you see what I
Nice.
just did?
I did. That was fantastic.
Fancy
Yes.
wordplay. But the great thing is I can just call you and leverage you to armbar you to get you in here anytime, because
Yep.
you're doing the deal and our conversations are always rich. But 2 questions I always ask my guests. The first one, and it's not really fair to you because you know us so well. We're such close friends. But what is your perception of Eileen and I and the ministry, of who we are?
I tell people all the time, you're the real deal. What you see is what you get. And that's a rare quality in today's world. And so if you want to know who Victor and Eileen are, then just listen to their stuff that they do. Read the stuff he puts out. And that's who he is. And that's who he is in his house. That's who he is. He's real. He's raw. You guys are vulnerable. You guys are transparent. You guys love well and deeply. And you'll say it the way it is, which is, again, it's so refreshing in our world today, because what you hear out there is, well, vulnerability isn't manly. Vulnerability is a feminine trait. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a human trait. But you can also be a doormat. You can also be someone who's just like soft. That's different from vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So I think that those are things that you guys are. I
Thank you.
love you guys, and it's something that I know that the other thing is, I know that if I got an issue, I need someone to call. I can call you, and I'd be like, hey, bro, I need you, and you'd be there.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yep.
yeah, I'd see Black Hawk helicopters coming into my hometown. I'd be all right, like we're good. We'd figure it out.
We are the quick reactionary force for any of our friends. That's for true. Thank you. I'm humbled and encouraged by your words, Phil. Last one. This is the biggie. We're all going to die. I'm probably going to be ahead of you in this game, which just, I'm good with that. I'm going to run my race. But when you die, what's going to happen to you? And why do you believe this? And before you answer, Folks, this is an intellectual. This is a learned man. This is he is smart. But what's going to happen to you, and why do you believe it, Phil?
I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm going to be worshiping with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, with the Trinity. And again, I don't fully understand the Trinity, but I know the Bible tells me about it, and it tells me there's God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. We're going to be worshiping together. We're going to be bowed down at the throne, and it's going to be glorious. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be something that we cannot even imagine with our puny little brains here on earth. And so when we try to, it just pales in comparison to what we're going to enjoy. We can read through Revelation and see pictures of some of it, but I believe because the Bible tells me so, right? At the end of the day, that's what it is. And people go, well, that's this and that's that and that's the other thing. I'm going to go, look, God is real to me. The sacrifice Jesus made on the cross gives me access, justifies me. It gives me an ability to co-labor with him, to love him, to help make all things new. And when we're there, all things will be new, brother. And we're going to be able to worship together. We're going to be able to no tear will be shed. We will be able to be new creations. And, we are new creations in Christ, yes. But then you're not going to have that pain you have. I'm not going to have pain. Yeah. I'm not going to play a soccer game and be hurting all the time. It's going to be fantastic. So that's who I am. And if you want to call me some like dreamer because of that, I'm going to say, hey, you're not reading the same Bible I am, because that's what it says, and that's what we're going to be able to do, and let's talk. And I do want to say at the end of this, Victor, like, look, folks out there, talk to me. If you want to connect with me, I would love to jump on a call with you and talk about any of these things that we've talked about today.
How can they do that? I mean, thank you for making yourself available, because there are really genuine people who would enjoy that and reaching out. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just email me at pdarke, PDARKE, at providenceworld.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. That's my email address, and just shoot me an email. It'll come right to me.
Are you on social media too, though?
Oh, yeah, I am.
You got some social media action?
At Phil Darke Twitter, at Phil Darke Instagram, Phil Darke on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy. It's the guy who is the orphan care guy. And Facebook is Phil Darke as well. I just keep it pretty simple there. Yeah.
And that's DARKE.
Correct.
Phil Darke. Brother, thank you.
Absolutely.
And you know what? These have been 2 great days. If you didn't catch the first broadcast, make sure you go back. Powerful stuff that can make a difference in us and advancing the kingdom of God in every way. So listen, whatever you're called to do, whatever lane you're running in, just let's go get it done. God bless y'all.